Often, the hardest part about writing a story can be ending the story. And it was all a dream. Sounds great. Not if you're a teacher. Your teacher has heard this ending hundreds of times before. And it was all a dream is not the only ending line that you need to look out for in your stories. A red flag should also flutter in your brain if you ever use one of these three. And they all lived happily ever after. Or was it? And so we all went home. So how else can we end our stories? Let's look at 11 story ending strategies that you might want to try. The anti-climax. With the anti-climax ending, you need to write a story that builds the fear. Write it in a suspenseful way so that the reader feels that something bad is going to happen. At the end of the story, you reveal that that bad thing is actually something quite innocent. The door creaked noisily as I opened it. I peered inside. My heart pounded as my eyes began to adjust to the dark. 2 large yellow eyes stared back at me. They belonged to Cuddles, my cat. The cliffhanger. With the cliffhanger, you don't fully finish your story. There's something that hasn't been concluded, and you leave it up to your reader to decide what might have happened next. The bear tore through the bushes towards us, but by then we were back inside the car. The windows were up and the doors were locked. "Drive!" I yelled. Sandra turned the key and, click, the battery was dead. End with the story title. By finishing your story with the exact words that you used as the title of your story, you have managed to join together the ending of your story with the beginning of your story, and this feels like a nice conclusion. So let's pretend that I've reached the end of a story I've been writing about a treasure island. As their canoe touched the rocks on the safe side of the river, Jennifer pulled the old bottle from her backpack and examined it. It really had been a treasure island. The look to the future ending. The look to the future ending is exactly that. You're going to take one of the characters from your story into the future and have them reflect on how this story has affected them. Much later in his life, Daniel became a fireman. On his helmet was written 81, the number of their house that had burnt down. The back home ending. The back home ending concludes your story with the main character or main characters going back home. And yes, finishing your story with "So we all went home" is indeed a back home ending. The trouble is, those particular words have been used over and over again. So the challenge is to write a back home ending in a way that seems fresh and different. It is usually best used at the end of an action-packed adventure story. It had been an adventurous day, but as the waves continued to crash and the wind continued to whine, I decided it would be best to return to the safety of my home. A warm bath awaited me. The time for bed ending. The time for bed ending is a popular way to end stories. You certainly don't want to finish with the words "it was time for bed," and need to write it in a way that again makes it fresh and different to the reader. This type of ending is probably best used again when a story has had lots of action happen. Later, I buried myself in my blankets and tucked the precious stone beneath my pillow, hoping to continue the adventurous day in my dreams. The dialogue ending. With the dialogue ending, you finish your story with a conversation between two of your characters. "Do you wish it turned out differently?" asked Tom. Sally threw a pebble into the pond and watched the ripples. "No," she said, "I don't think I do. It's given me a good story to tell my grandchildren." Ending with a question. Ending your story with a question is an effective way to finish because it encourages your reader to engage with the story even after they've finished reading it. They slid back into their seats just as Miss Sharples returned to the classroom. As she brushed out the coffee stain on her dress, they both grinned at each other. What would Miss Sharples think if she knew what they had done? The lesson learnt ending. With the lesson learnt ending, the main character will be a little bit wiser by the end of the story. It's usually good to use when, at some point in the story, the main character has received a warning not to do something, but they've gone ahead and done it anyway. And from that day on, I made sure never to walk down Finkel Road after dark again. Nicole had learned her lesson. Mums can be fussy, but sometimes they are right. She decided that she would listen to her mother's warnings in the future. The ending with an exclamation. The exclamation ending involves the main character changing their mind about something at the end of the story. This change of mind is revealed on the very last line of the story and ends with an exclamation mark. To us, Mr. Baxter wasn't a boring, fussy old neighbor anymore. He was a hero. The fairy tale ending, but with a twist. Most fairy tales end with the main characters living happily ever after. We're going to use that same line in our story ending. However, we're going to surprise the reader by giving it a little bit of a twist. And we all lived wealthily ever after. And the pirates lived angrily ever after. And the bear lived hungrily ever after. So there you have it. Make sure you end your stories in a more interesting, creative, and satisfying way. Use the anti-climax or the cliffhanger. End with the story title. Try the look to the future, the back home ending, the time for bed ending, the dialogue ending, the lesson learnt, ending with a question, ending with an exclamation, and finally, the fairy tale ending, but with a twist. Use one of these wonderful ways of ending your stories, and you'll have your readers jumping for joy.